Welcome back to Movies TV Man, and welcome to Friday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Yes, David S. Goyer has done an exclusive interview with The Hollywood Reporter. We're going to read it, go through it, expose it. Make no mistake, this is a man desperate to get back on side with woke Hollywood and make himself relevant again. I like David Goyer as a writer. He wrote 4 great DC movies: Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, and Man of Steel. But this interview is full of desperation, so let's dig deep into it. David S. Goyer interview. Inside his hits, fights, and upcoming Big A swings, the prolific IP whisperer gives a candid interview covering his past Blade, The Dark Knight, Man of Steel, present, the Tomorrow War, The Night House, and future Foundation Sandman projects, including his upcoming series that could redefine fantasy TV by James Hibbard of The Hollywood Reporter. The real reason he's doing this interview is to promote his new projects, like they all do. Make no mistake, David S. Goyer is not going to restore the Snyderverse. He's not your friend. He's not trying to do anything good or pure here. Anyway, David S. Goyer's home office in Hancock Park area of Los Angeles is lined with totems of personal significance from his childhood and global travels. There's a wall of hardcover comic books which he incredulously points at when asked his reaction to actor Stephen Dorff's recent viral comment slamming Marvel movies as not legitimate art. There's a framed Zen proverb, first tea, last tea, which he's taken to mean try to approach everything like it's the first time you're doing it or the very last time. And then there's perhaps the screenwriter's most prized possession, a 1908 Philippine silver dollar peso. As a six-year-old in Michigan, Goyer found the coin while digging in a mound of dirt and was stunned to learn it was then valued at $400. He literally found buried treasure. It sounds corny, but to me this represents possibility. The screenwriter says, holding the coin, I grew up with a single mum in Ann Arbor. I shoveled snow, mowed lawns, and didn't know anybody from Hollywood or comic books. So the idea I could leave Michigan and one day work on the superhero movies of the comics I've read as a kid is just amazing. Goyer's early career was spent writing scripts for a variety of genre titles, Death Warrant, The Puppet Masters, but it was his 1998 smash Blade that established him as a go-to talent who could translate comic book stories for a mass audience. Since Goyer has worked on all 3 of Christopher Nolan's Batman movies and 2 of Zack Snyder's DC films, right, we need a correction here. He only worked on Man of Steel. He has a credit for writing the script of Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, but in fact Chris Terrio rewrote this script. Chris Terrio actually came down hard on the original script, which was by David S. Goyer. Let's be clear about that. I like to be clear and honest so you know what's actually going on. His other credits include Terminator Dark Fate. Yeah, nothing to be proud of there. Other credits include Terminator Dark Fate, Constantine, Krypton, Da Vinci's Demons, Godzilla, and The Tomorrow War. I actually liked Krypton and Da Vinci's Demons. Now, the 55-year-old father of 3 is taking a break from capes and cows by adapting 2 iconic and notoriously creatively complex titles for streaming: Neil Gaiman's metaphysical graphic novel Sandman for Netflix and Isaac Asimov's epic Foundation trilogy for Apple. Also, Goyer's production company Phantom 4 is producing the Sundance-acclaimed horror thriller The Night House, a ghost story about grief, which is being released into theatres next month. Of course, we must get his CV right, so whatever he says is God and law. DC has had some ups and downs in recent years, especially compared to Marvel. Here we go again. DC's movies are superior to Marvel's movies. The franchise may not be as a franchise, but the movies are better. Anyway, compared to Marvel, if you were running DC, which I'd never want to... Yeah, say that again. DC has had some ups and downs in recent years, especially compared to Marvel. If you were running DC, which I'd never want to do, so you should be keeping your mouth shut about DC then anyway. But let's say you were. What moves would you make next? I think one of the issues is that Marvel's had consistent leadership for the last 15 years or more, whereas DC hasn't. There have been all of these changes in terms of who is running DC. That is fundamentally very hard. It's hard to make any headway when leadership is changing. One of the other things that's made Marvel incredibly successful is all of their adaptations are true to the source material. Ant-Man feels like Ant-Man, Hulk feels like the Hulk. They don't try to change things up. Professor Hulk's from the comics, but Professor Hulk's shit, David. Anyway, I would say try to hew closer to what was the original intent. So it's having a consistent universe, having consistent leadership, and staying true to the source material. Right. Man of Steel is not an adaptation from the comics. You wrote Man of Steel. You wrote Batman Begins. You wrote The Dark Knight. You wrote The Dark Knight Rises. These were not direct adaptations. You are a hypocrite. You've been involved in a lot of projects where there were many big egos on board and a ton of studio pressure. How do you handle a situation where you believe strongly something is the right move and others believe differently? I hope I've developed a reputation now for speaking with candor, for being honest. My go-to is always what works for the story, and if I'm adapting an IP like a comic book, I don't try to turn it into something it's not. Really? Because if you do, no matter what, even if you have the best of intentions, it will definitely not work out. So there were times when I've been involved in projects when I've actually advocated that the studio not make it. I said it's going to fail, it's not worth the money. I've taught myself out of movies and TV shows being made before. Well, I have to ask, what's an example of that? I will say one was the previous iteration of Sandman. It was a feature. Was this the script that Neil Gaiman famously declared was not only the worst Sandman script I've ever seen, but quite, I've got a fly on me, sorry about that, I've ever seen, but quite easily the worst script I've ever read? Fortunately, no. I was trying to get Warner Brothers to do a streaming serialized show, and they wanted to do it as a feature instead. So Neil and I worked on a feature, and through the various iterations, it just kept subtly getting more and more deformed and shifting more and more away from the true north. Finally, we just said, guys, please, let's stop. Let's kill it. Let's do it as a streaming show. Eventually, they did. The Dark Knight is considered by some, myself included, as the best superhero film of all time. I like it, but to me it's not the best. What film, in your opinion, holds that title? I can tell you my top four: The Dark Knight, Logan, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok is an okay movie, but one of the best of all time, that's when you know not to trust someone. But the others, I can kind of understand that opinion. When I watched its sequel, The Dark Knight Rises, I will always think that if Heath Ledger hadn't passed away, his Joker would have been one of the characters released from Arkham Asylum by Bane's Tom Hardy plan. I realised Rises wasn't written until after the second film was released and Ledger's death, but I've always wanted to ask, what role would you ideally have had the Joker play in the third film? Wow, obviously that would have completely changed the polarity of that third film. And it's true, we didn't discuss the third film until 2 or 3 months after The Dark Knight had come out. Chris wasn't interested in discussing what might happen in the next film. He always wanted to focus on the film in hand. He didn't want to lay any groundwork for something that may or may not happen. But it's a logical assumption that the Joker would have been released, and it's certainly interesting to think of what would have happened if we had done that. Yeah, Ledger's Joker was always going to be in The Dark Knight Rises. That really deplatformed, descaled The Dark Knight Rises, because the plan was to have the Joker very prevalent in that movie. Zack Snyder recently claimed that if it wasn't off the table to set Man of Steel in the Nolanverse, which is tough to imagine, was that ever discussed? Not amongst us when I was doing the Man of Steel, or among Nolan and myself. Chris always wanted to keep the Dark Knight film as a separate entity, a massive mistake. And the studio kept wanting, understandably, to pull him into whole DC Expanded Universe. Chris obviously was a producer on Man of Steel, and it's tempting to think they were linked, but they really weren't. I mean, I'm sure one could retroactively do it. It was a big mistake not to do this. If Bale's Batman was linked to Cavill's Man of Steel, you would have had a really successful franchise continuing in Man of Steel. It was the right move. If Nolan actually wanted to run the DCEU properly, instead of being, you know what, I do want to do it, but I don't want to do it. Oh, here's Zack Snyder. Bye, I'm going after Man of Steel. That's where the real problems began. We heard Bridgerton breakout Regé-Jean Page was up for the role of Superman's grandfather in your Krypton series, but that DC President Jeff Johns nixed it, saying Superman couldn't have a black grandfather. Also that a proposal for Adam Strange being gay or bisexual was rejected. True. Don't care. Don't care if Adam Strange was bisexual or gay. Wouldn't care if he was, and it doesn't matter that they didn't want this to happen. Now, before I give you his answer to this, I want to say where I stand on the Superman's grandfather, who was played by Cameron Cuff in the end, who is a white actor and did a great job. Basically his name was Seg-El. They wanted a black actor to play Seg-El instead. Let me say this to you, because I know what your woke answer is going to be, David Goyer. If you wanted Superman to have a black grandfather, why didn't you do Callum Ellis's Krypton backstory, right? Who's a black Superman? Why didn't you do that? Instead, you wanted to transform the white Superman story into a black Superman, and this is the problem with you people. All I will say on this is that I was the one who wanted to cast Page. I thought he was amazing. I thought his audition was amazing. I advocated very hard to cast him in that role. I thought he was a fantastic actor back then, and he continues to be a fantastic actor. I wanted him to play Superman's grandfather. I've given you my response to this. You could have done, you literally could have picked one of the black Supermen from the comics and did his backstory, and then could have had this actor, this black actor, as Superman's grandfather. But you didn't want to do that. So you can't start crying about Warner Brothers and Jeff Johns now. What's one comic book character you've always wanted to adapt but you haven't? There are things I've written that never made it to screen. I did an early draft of Doctor Strange about 18 years ago. I would love to write the Hulk. He was my favourite character as a kid. The Hulk has been considered a tough one to crack. What is a take on the character that you feel hasn't really been done in recent years? I love the Jekyll and Hyde aspects that comic creators Peter David and Bruce Jones have done. The current run right now, the Immortal Hulk, I think is fantastic. I think it would be better on TV. I like leaning into this psychological horror and Hulk's rage as an expression of Banner, his suppressed ID. He talks about Marvel, you know, sticking to the origin material, but really Hulk hasn't really done that, and that's a shame. Comics better test all these ideas when you have characters and that have been around for 30, 40, 50 or 60 years. And you've seen certain storylines bubble to the top again and again. That should tell you something. I call it story Darwinism. So those are ideas or themes that are sticky, that are consistent, because for whatever reason, from a decade to decade to decade, they keep working, even though some of the elements around them change. So anytime I adapt something, I always say, can we identify the 10 core elements that make Superman, Superman, or make Blade, Blade? Before we even come up with a story, let's just sit down and come up with what 10 things we can all agree on. Then let's make sure that we don't break those commandments. Similarly, what one comic character would, let's say that again, similarly, what one comic character would you never want to take on? I don't think I'd be the right guy to do Wonder Woman. I don't think I would be the right guy to do Thor, even though I love what they've done. I appreciate those, but I just don't think I'd be the right guy to do them. Which script that was produced would you most want to take another pass at? The tricky thing with writers, particularly in film, less so in television, is you have to have written roughly 1/3 of a film in order to get credit. But someone else could have written 25%, someone else could have written 20%, and someone else could have written 15%, so you can end up being the only credited writer. But 70% of the script isn't yours. So I definitely have projects that I've worked on where I'm sole credited writer, yet I've been taken to task for elements in the film that I actually did not write, for scenes that I fought against, and I was fired. So that's frustrating. And he was fired from Batman vs Superman. That's the truth of the matter. I'll ask a different way. What's the most painful specific change that somebody else made to one of your scripts? The films that I've fault reflecting my work accurately with the Dark Knight films. I think Foundation does. The first 7 episodes of Flash Forward, the first couple of seasons of Da Vinci's Demons, the first 2 Blade films. But I had ideas I wish I could have put in Terminator Dark Fate. Here we go, trying to make sure you know that it wasn't all his fault. Producer James Cameron and director Tim Miller have both been pretty candid that Dark Fate was a bloodbath fight between them editing that film. What did you want to see in the final edit? I had a very good experience with Jim on that film. Jim and I developed the remake of Fantastic Voyage that has yet to be filmed. We have a very similar story since. I think the movie is a good movie. The thing that I'm most proud of is we got Linda Hamilton back into the franchise because her character in the film is amazing. I was part of the group that advocated for her to rejoin, and it wasn't a foregone conclusion that she would. To me, the best part of the film is seeing her come back and seeing this incredibly badass woman at her age. So whatever happened with the reception of the film, I was just really proud of the fact that I had a small part in coaxing her back into it. Yeah, Linda Hamilton was great, but the other actresses did a good job. But it was the writing that destroyed those women in that film, right? So let's not just talk about Linda Hamilton. Let's credit the other actresses that did a good job under impossible circumstances, and this is the problem with Hollywood. Speaking of fights, I must ask this because the internet needs to know. Is Patton Oswalt's story true that Wesley Snipes tried to strangle you in the set of Blade Trinity, which Snipes has denied? If so, what prompted that? Let's just say I have tremendous respect for Wesley as an actor. He used to be a friend. We're not friends anymore. I am friends with Patton and I worked with Patton since, so I don't think anyone involved in that film had a good experience on that film. Certainly I don't think anybody involved with that film is happy with the results. It was very tortured production. So Wesley Snipes did attempt to strangle you though, but these actors in Hollywood will keep on telling us how we're bad people, talking down to us, talking to us about compassion and kindness, but Wesley Snipes tried to strangle a writer, and that's okay, right? But let's keep on talking about toxic fandoms. Henry Cavill and others have advocated for a direct sequel to Man of Steel. I've heard rumours a sequel may be in the works with Cavill on board. Warner Brothers says none is in development. Does it feel like there is still unfinished business with that story? I think so. I'm not involved in that right now. I've heard the same rumours you've heard, but I'm not plugged into it. I've stepped away most entirely from comic book related projects other than Sandman, which I don't really categorise as part of the normal DC universe, but it is part of the DC universe, my friend, like it or not. And I'm doing a Batman podcast. I've actually done so many adaptations of comics that I needed a break. Of course you did. I didn't want to get into a rut. That's why I'm doing Foundation and some other films, like The Night House and Atlas, which aren't being released by Searchlight. You thought you'd just drop that in. So basically, he says there's still a story to tell there. Right, I know everyone was getting excited about this, and the guy, the journalist, right, Hibbard, is saying there's rumours that a Henry Cavill movie is being developed. That's interesting. All I know about Henry Cavill's Superman at this moment is he's going to cameo in a whole bunch of films, DCEU films in production right now. I don't know anything about a standalone movie, but I will look into it. But at this moment in time, I don't think that's a go at WB. The Foundation trailer looks incredible. Haven't the big challenges of the story been that it's concept driven rather than character driven? Plus it spans so many years, right? I don't want to talk about Foundation. Let's just make sure that, I think that's it really. They're the points. I don't really want to talk about the plugging of his new project because that's why he's doing the interview. Right, I will highlight my points about this interview. This is an interview by a man who's back in the game. He's been out of the game for a while. David S. Goyer wrote Blade 2. I don't know. Look, I've never seen the Blade movies. All I can talk about is Man of Steel and the Dark Knight trilogy. They were beautifully written movies. There is no question about that. This man has a talent. The stuff with the codex he came up with, the cloning of Kryptonians, all great ideas. But I will repeat one thing and one thing again. That if they wanted a black man to play Superman's grandfather, then they should have adapted the Calvin Ellis grandfather, right? That's all they had to do. But they didn't want to do that. Jeff Johns' point was, you're adapting the prequel of White Superman, so why should he be a black actor? Adapt the black Superman and it's fine. That's what Jeff Johns' point was. And there's another thing which I heard was in this interview that I haven't seen. Apparently someone said to him at WB, and this was over 8 years ago, don't destroy Superman's ship to stop Zod, because how will he get back home? Now this is kind of laughable because Krypton was destroyed. Now, this is to try and make Warner Brothers look clueless. Now, let me explain to you what the executive actually meant. Now, in Superman Returns with his spaceship to the remnants, the remainder of Krypton, and he explores it. And it's a great moment. The return to Krypton sequence should have been in Superman Returns. Big mistake that it wasn't. Now, this is what the actual movie executive was talking about. What if he wants to go back one day and explore the remains of Krypton? That's what he meant. But these people are so bitter and twisted, they try and make these people look bad. This is nearly a decade ago. New people are running the DCEU. And I'm sorry, Snyderverse propaganda leaders, this doesn't prove anything. This doesn't stop the production of the 5 movies in production or the great HBO Max DC projects that are in development and are in production. Now, you may get a buzz out of all of this, but let's just call it as it is. You lost. You lost. Your agenda was great when you were trying to attempt to release the Snyder Cut. I was there with you because you had a positive campaign. The restoration of the Snyderverse campaign is bitter, full of spreading lies and shit. So this interview does nothing to restore the Snyderverse. I like David Goyer as a writer, but some of the stuff I didn't like in this interview. So I hope there's a Man of Steel movie. He made some interesting points. I will not be watching his new projects. If he writes a DC show or movie again, I will be very, very interested. Ray Fisher is back with a tweet. Does anyone know when Walter Hamada plans to come out of hiding? Asking for a friend. Accountability over entertainment A&E. Ray, I've got this to say to you. The man's not in hiding. He doesn't want to talk to you, Ray. Why would he want to talk to you? He tried to educate you. He tried to explain to you the situation. He explained to you the studio's position, that they didn't want Jeff Johns outed, and you did. It's as simple as that. And because of this, instead of being honest and saying, listen, the studio have made their position clear, I don't agree with the studio's position, you went out there and tried to expose Walter Hamada for something that wasn't his fault. You bullied and harassed him using social media. Nobody's hiding from you, Ray. WB and Walter Hamada, the DC Films president, is too busy developing and making superior content. It's as simple as that. No one cares what you've had to say. No one cares what you have to say today or yesterday. It was all very relevant when the Snyderverse was about to be released. Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut was about to be released. It's not relevant anymore. You are an out-of-work actor, a bitter and twisted person with a political agenda, and no one gives a shit. No one, my friend, is hiding from you. I have a bit of an update for you from the Flash movie, and this is from at Flash Film News. Exclusive W filming trucks were recently spotted at Guildford Street, London. It was recently confirmed by Bleeding Cool that Flash will be filming scenes at Goodenough College in late July, which is around the corner from this location. So this is where they're setting up shop, if you can see that. So it looks a great place to create a stage for a movie. And again, you can see them setting up shop there as well. So this is very, very exciting. So the Flash movie is very much still in production and in filming. They're not wrapping yet. It doesn't look like they'll be wrapping for a while yet. I thought this movie would be wrapped up by now, but of course this is a huge movie, very exciting, so many DC characters, and maybe, just maybe, just like the Spideyverse animated movie had these different Spider-Men from different Earths, maybe this is what it's going to take to get Barry off the world he creates when he goes back in time to try and change the past. Maybe he needs all the past Flashes. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had the original Flash from the original 90s TV show, Grant Gustin's Flash, and different Flashes that they create in the film, and they all have to help Ezra Miller's Barry Allen to get back home. Maybe they all run, they have to run as fast as possible to reboot the multiverse. How exciting would that be? James Gunn says Suicide Squad 2 is the ultimate all-time comic book movie. Writer-director James Gunn, who has made a name for himself in the genre, says The Suicide Squad is the ultimate all-time comic book movie by Josh Planisi of Screen Rant. Writer-director James Gunn says Suicide Squad is the ultimate all-time comic book movie. Gunn started out writing indie horror and working on films such as Warner Bros. Live-action Scooby-Doo and Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead after making his directorial debut with the horror comedy Sliver 2006 and helming his first superhero outing with Super 2010. Gunn brought a ragtag group of misfits, aka the Guardians of the Galaxy, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Due to his work on the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, Gunn is now best known for subverting expectations associated with comic book movies. Why do they use that fucking term and think they're clever? That's not what he does. That's not what he does. Anyway, before the release of that first film, casual moviegoers did not know the names Star-Lord, Rocket, Groot, Gamora and Drax. This is why when Marvel Disney haphazardly and briefly decided to fire Gunn, Warner Bros. Hired Gunn to write and direct DC project of his choosing. When his affinity for oddball outcasts, Gunn was drawn to John Ostrander's The Suicide Squad. The reboot sequel to David Ayer's Suicide Squad 2016 sees Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie and Task Force X and welcomes little-known newcomers including Bloodsport, Idris Elba, Peacemaker, John Cena, Weasel, Sean Gunn, Polka Dot Man, David Dastmalchian, King Shark, Sylvester Stallone and TDK, Nathan Fillion. To promote the Suicide Squad's August release on HBO Max and in theatres, Gunn, Robbie and Cena, sporting his Peacemaker costume, recently stopped by Jimmy Kimmel Live. During the conversation, Gunn talked about the wanting to make the ultimate all-time comic book movie. Read what he had to say below. Really, I just wanted to do the ultimate all-time comic book movie. I created the Suicide Squad based on one of my favourite books of all time by John Ostrander about a group of really crappy supervillains being used as fodder by the US government for black ops, putting them out on suicide visits where most of them die. This group of Suicide Squad members goes to Corte Maltese, a fictional island off the coast of Argentina, to try and stop an insurrection. Gunn's villainous ensemble is set to honour Ostrander's comic by being an unpredictable R-rated romp. Having complete creative control over the project, Gunn has repeatedly teased the Suicide Squad will have a devastating death toll. He's warned fans not to get too attached to any characters on this press tour. Gunn also said he believes contemporary comic book movies are boring, saying if they don't change, they're gonna get really boring. That said, movies taking place within the MCU have often been criticised for being formulaic, and that's the problem, and that's what he's talking about. The Suicide Squad looks to live up to its hype and be one of the most exciting comic book movies in quite some time. Clearly WB has faith in Gunn's ultimate all-time comic book movie, as they already produced the HBO Max spin-off Peacemaker, which was created, written and mostly directed by Gunn following his work in the DC Extended Universe. Gunn will begin production of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The third Guardians entry is set to be another ultimate all-time comic book movie and will likely be his last collaboration with Marvel Studios. Bringing back to DC, can't wait for him to return where he belongs. Why does James Gunn get all this freedom, you're asking, and Zack Snyder doesn't? Because James Gunn appeals to the broader audience and Snyder doesn't. Snyder goes off on a tangent and does whatever he wants to do, which is the antithesis of what James Gunn is, and that's why James has gladly got the freedom of Warner Brothers. And here's a bit of a light-hearted one for you on today's Movies TV Mad Daily. Margot Robbie used to sleep in a room with a giant John Cena cardboard cutout. Margot Robbie reveals during a Jimmy Kimmel Live interview that she used to sleep in a room with a giant cardboard cutout of co-star John Cena by Morgan Atland of Screen Rant. Actress Margot Robbie used to sleep in a room with a giant cardboard cutout of WWE superstar and actor John Cena. The two are set to share the screen, Robbie as Harley Quinn and Cena as Peacemaker, in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, debuting in theatres and HBO Max August the 6th. Fellow co-star Jay Courtney, who portrays Captain Boomerang, has promised that The Suicide Squad is very violent, something both fans of the original 2016 film The Suicide Squad and of the comics can delight in. Unfortunately, a lot of the fans of the first one are trying to boycott this movie, but that's up to them. They'll be missing out. The Suicide Squad has managed to set a high bar for itself in terms of meeting fans' expectations, with Gunn behind the helm, who has already led comic characters to the forefront of a cinematic universe with Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Task Force X should be able to shoot, stab and explode their way into the hearts of audiences with ease. The film also features an incredibly stacked cast with household names like Sylvester Stallone, Viola Davis and Idris Elba, in addition to the stars on the rise like Pete Davidson and Mailing NG. It is nearly impossible to see a familiar face behind a mask or a costume. While on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote the film's upcoming release, Robbie revealed to guest host Anthony Anderson that she used to sleep in a room with a giant cardboard cutout of Cena. Cena, who appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live in his Peacemaker costume, could hardly contain himself as Robbie revealed her former boyfriend's obsession with him. Read what Robbie said below. I was with a man who was obsessed with John Cena, so much so that he dressed as John Cena for his 21st birthday. He had a cardboard cutout of John Cena in his bedroom, so I slept in a room for 2 years with a life-size cardboard cutout of John Cena in the room. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and gasp, oh, it's just John Cena, it's okay. I remember thinking, like now, that I'm going to be working with John Cena, should I tell him this, or is that going to be weird? I thought, I'm just going to keep that to myself. That would be a weird way to start our working relationship and friendship. Then 5 seconds later, I was like, I used to sleep in a room with a life-size cutout of you. But now I know that there's very little to weird out this guy. That's true. Having recently returned to the WWE during the Money in the Bank pay-per-view event, it is clear that Cena will always be associated with wrestling, being tied with Ric Flair for the most World Championship reigns. The adoration of fans and all the glory that they give superstars can lead to representations of their fandom in many forms, having action figures, t-shirts, memes and endless merchandise with his face printed across it. His star power continues to grow with all of the young fans who watched as he joined the WWF in 2001, as well as the fans of his later years when he worked names such as AJ Styles in the ring. The number of people who grew up with Cena on their walls will no doubt continue to rise. What may seem like an oddity may in fact be more commonplace for him as he continues to expand his career. With his role in The Suicide Squad, in addition to the series Peacemaker debuting on HBO Max in 2022, Cena will continue to gain young followers who will obsess over the star's every action. Gunn continues to build excitement for the film, releasing a new movie poster featuring mini starros on the faces of the film's cast. Be sure to watch to see if the villains can live long enough to save the day, or if the government will just have to blow them up and bring in the next big bad who's sent behind the bars. Very interesting, very funny that Margot Robbie used to date someone who had a big life-size John Cena in his bedroom. Imagine that. Maybe Margot had some fantasies. I am just saying, maybe she didn't, maybe she didn't. Kidding. I'm joking. As they just said in the last article, there is a new poster for James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, and every character is covered, their face is covered with mini starros. Now obviously this is a clue. Now does this mean that all these characters are actually killed by Starro himself, or by maybe, I mean listen, I know certain things about this film. Maybe, I'm not saying there is, but maybe some of them, 1 or 2 of them or more, kill each other. Maybe, you'll have to wait and see. Anyway, Suicide Squad 2 cast covered by mini starros in the new movie poster. Writer-director James Gunn shares a new poster for the Suicide Squad showing the members of Task Force X with their faces covered by mini starros by Adam Benz of Screen Rant. The Suicide Squad gets a new poster showing the cast covered in mini starros. James Gunn is known for directing the first 2 volumes of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, but his highly anticipated next project, the superhero auteur, is tackling a DC property with his own take on the titular team of supervillains. Gunn's version won't address its predecessor, even though he's recast 4 of the actors who were in the first movie, playing exactly the same characters. That's addressing the first movie. Sorry to disappoint you. With his own take on the titular team of supervillains. Gunn's version won't address its predecessor 2016 Suicide Squad from director David Ayer in any significant way other than returning few characters. Yes, that's addressing the previous film, like it or not. Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie, Rick Flag, Joel Kinnaman and Captain Boomerang Jay Courtney make up the returning Task Force X roster, along with their ruthless leader Amanda Waller, portrayed by Viola Davis. Gunn also dug deep in DC's comics obscurity to assemble a whole new lineup of lovable delinquents, Peacemaker, John Cena and Bloodsport Idris Elba among them. For the film's villain, Gunn went with another odd choice in Starro the Conqueror, a giant blue starfish that hails from outer space and has powers of mind control. This is going to be a very relevant and interesting kind of theme within the film, the fact that Starro can control people's minds. Now, the upcoming DCEU film has gotten a brand new poster. Writer-director James Gunn shared the poster on his Instagram page, which highlights all 16 members of the Suicide Squad, but with one small caveat. Their faces are covered by mini Starros. Check out the new poster below. So, this is the new poster. James posted this yesterday. I think this is kind of a cryptic clue. I haven't really worked it out myself. I mean, I think that's all of them. I think it may not be all of them, but as we know, most of these characters are going to die anyway. So very, very interesting. A creatively interesting poster. This poster is ostensibly a reference to issue 190 of the Justice League comic that was published in 1981 and features Superman and other members of the team with their faces covered by mini Starros. Gunn referenced this very comic recently when explaining why he chose Starro to be the film's villain, citing the fact that he was terrified by the giant starfish as a kid. But maybe it's a clue to some references in this film from that Justice League comic. Interesting. It's unclear if this poster is merely a creative marketing ploy or a hint that mini Starros will play a role in the film. Mini Starros will play a role in the film, but this was hinted at in the recent trailer in which Starro is birthing a bunch of mini starfish out of the sky. Although this moment flashed by a little too quickly for many to notice, in the comics, Star Conquerors are able to asexually reproduce vast numbers of offspring that latch onto and enslave the minds of the subjects. When they talk about asexually, they mean Starro didn't mate with anyone to have these offsprings. That's basically, we're also obsessed with these tags, but why don't we explain to people what we actually mean? While the idea of a casual-sized telepathic starfish in Suicide Squad was already terrifying enough, the idea of thousands of mini Starros latching onto Task Force X's faces somehow ratchets up the fear factor. So that's something new we didn't know a couple of days ago, or that you didn't know a couple of days ago, that there will be mini Starros being hatched from the main Starro, and they're probably going to latch themselves onto the Suicide Squad and control their minds. What does this mean? Another clue, probably how some of them kill each other. A little clue for you there. So excited for James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I want people to enjoy it. I can't wait to see the finished article of this film. I hope it makes as much money as possible and everybody just embraces the film. Yes, very exciting news. Anna Torv, who played Olivia, I nearly forgot her name. Let's start again. Anna Torv, who played Olivia in J.J. Abrams' Fringe show, which was an awesome awesome show, shall I say. It actually was an awesome Fringe show, has been cast in The Last of Us show. Cast Mindhunter's Anna Torv as Tess. I don't know why they would mention Mindhunter rather than Fringe. Fringe is the thing people really remember her for. HBO's heavily anticipated adaptation of the hit game series The Last of Us has cast yet another character from the original game, with Anna Torv as Tess, by Mike Jones of Screen Rant. HBO's hotly anticipated TV series adaptation of Last of Us has cast Mindhunter star, or should we say Fringe star, Anna Torv as Tess. First released in 2013, the 2 games in the series have been massive hits for Naughty Dog and Sony Computer Entertainment, with exclusive rights granted to Sony PlayStation consoles. The original game was remastered and re-released in 2014, with The Last of Us Part 2 arriving to tremendous acclaim in 2020 despite a delayed release. Has it been that successful? I thought there was a lot of blowback for that game. Anyway, as a third-person action-adventure survival horror game, The Last of Us took the concept of a post-apocalyptic world plagued by flesh-eating zombie-like creatures to the next level. After 60% of the global human population is killed off by a mutated strain of the cordyceps fungus, smuggler Joel finds himself forced to accompany 14-year-old Ellie from Boston across the United States to find anti-government militia, the Fireflies. Ellie has proven herself immune to the cordyceps virus, a first for mankind, and is therefore a vital link to a potentially finding a cure to the sickness that has killed and altered and devastated society. The success of the first game prompted efforts to develop a film adaptation, but this fell apart after the game's writer Neil Druckmann disagreed with the studio over the film's scale. By late 2020, HBO revealed they were working on developing a TV adaptation of The Last of Us. The series is now currently filming, and as Deadline reports, the latest casting decision is to bring on Anna Torv as Joel's fellow smuggler, Tess. The character is seen in the early stages of the first game and is responsible for ensuring that Joel commits to taking Ellie to a Firefly base located across the country. Ruthless and strong-willed, Tess made for an ideal partner to Joel during his black market days. At present, the cast of The Last of Us includes Pedro Pascal, the Mandalorian, as Joel, and Bella Ramsey, Game of Thrones, as Ellie. Great casting, by the way. Gabriel Luna, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., will play Joel's brother Tommy, with Nico Parker taking on the prologue role of Joel's 12-year-old daughter Sarah, and Meryl Dundridge as Firefly leader Marlene. Given the harsh nature of The Last of Us in terms of the survival rate of its characters, the series will likely be comparable in several respects to AMC's long-running hit The Walking Dead. Let's hope it doesn't lose as much steam as The Walking Dead did, or lose so many creatives in falling out with the company as The Walking Dead did. However, the real key to the success of The Last of Us will be its focus on the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Yes, very important, the likes of which has been able to strike an emotional chord with gamers for years. Now, this is very important in this extreme left society, to see an older man with a younger woman who's not his daughter, to strike up this caring bond is very important. Now, the extreme leftists will not like this. They will, maybe even because they're so toxic, try and evoke accusations of paedophilia and things like that, because this is how twisted these people are. Just don't forget what they said about the Joker movie. So they will act up and try and create some anti-sentiment to this series, but I'm very excited for this story, because I'm sure most of us know that it is an important story. The game is important, and I can't wait to see this. Though Tess isn't in The Last of Us game for long, her role in the story of Joel and Ellie can greatly be extended in the TV series. It will be interesting to see if HBO digs a little deeper into the relationship between Joel and Tess, particularly their early days spent together, smuggling and dealing with all sorts of semi-lucrative black market trades. Regardless of how the relationship is handled, however, The Last of Us has been demanding a live-action spin-off from the moment it was delivered to the public as a game. Whether or not HBO finds success with the IP is hard to say right now, but the odds seem to be in its favour in regards to the cast. When you're casting people like Anna Torv, who's a fantastic actress, who's been in Mindhunter, of course, but I think her best role is in Fringe. She was amazing as Olivia Dunham in Fringe, and I can't wait to see her and the rest of the cast in this groundbreaking show. Let's finish off by talking about the power of film, TV drama and storytelling. It's a great power and it's a great tool. We live in such desperate, changing times. This is our generation's World War III. That's what COVID is. And we're going to have to live with this. You know, different versions of this virus, and being locked up in our homes and having restrictions for a very long time. And film, storytelling, novels and books and comic books are so fucking important, everyone. And what we're seeing today in this industry, where they want to force our faces in the real world, is very damaging to our generation and to the younger generation too. Because escapism is so very important in the darkest of times. I remember the soldiers in the Second World War talking about how important the Wonder Woman comics were to them and the Superman comics were. They were there on the fields of battle, in between battles, reading comics and escaping the horrible nightmare, the horrible lives they had to live. Escapism is so very important. And when you decide that escapism isn't very important and that everybody has to see themselves and everybody has to talk about Trump in their movies, then we live in a very, very dangerous world. We already live in a very dark, depressing, angry, aggressive world. Please don't take away our escapism. Thankfully, we have older stories to read and watch. But wouldn't it be a shame if modern storytelling, films, books and comic books and TV took escapism from its consumer? So please don't do that. Let us escape now and again. I beg you. Because escapism in storytelling is the most important thing. Let me just tell you this. It's the thing that keeps you going. As a kid, I wasn't a very happy kid, but escaping within movies was very important to me. And I don't know what I would have done if I'd still be here today if I didn't have that escapism. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter @MoviesTVMad, and I will see you again in the next video. This has been Friday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives, and I'll see you again soon.